When configuring our Fibre channel network, relying on port worldwide node names can lead to mistakes and errors. It's pretty complicated to keep all of those straight, configure them, associate them with applications, associate them with zones, which is a technology that we're going to talk about in the next module. So instead of doing that, instead of relying on the configuration of each individual port worldwide node name, we're going to show you how to create aliases, different names that we can use in place of these hexadecimal port worldwide node names. So right away, know that there's two ways that we can create aliases. We've got the Fibre channel method, which is what we're going to begin with. And then later on, we're going to show you another method, which is very similar, but it's different, and that's the distributed device aliases. So both of these technologies allow us to create aliases for our port worldwide node names. However, they're going to behave a little bit differently, and they're going to be used in a variety of ways. The Fibre channel aliases, that method has been around the longest, and so therefore it's considered a legacy feature, a legacy technology. It limits these aliases per vSAN. So if you create an alias for one of your storage devices and you give it a name, maybe you call it storage, that's fine, but that name is only going to pertain to the vSAN that you're configuring it in. Fibre channel aliases are not going to be distributed using the Cisco Fabric services. This is where we can make a configuration change on a single switch. Well, unfortunately, this is not something that Fibre channel aliases can take advantage of. We can only use Fibre channel aliases for zoning. So if we can't distribute it and it's only relevant per vSAN, what in the world would we use these Fibre channel aliases for? Well, if you ask that question, it's a good one. The answer is zoning. What's zoning? Well, I have to punt on this one because the next module is pretty much, here's everything you need to know about zoning. Essentially, it's a security configuration, kind of like an access list that we configure for Fibre channel switches. That technology is going to use these Fibre channel aliases. Well, okay, there is one other use for these Fibre channel alias, and that would be if we were to connect to switches that are non-Cisco, because those switches are not going to support distributed device aliases. And so therefore, in a limited capacity, we could use Fibre channel aliases. Here's what a Fibre channel alias allows us to do. We can create a familiar name, such as storage disk 12, to describe storage disk 12. And therefore, when we reference this object, we don't have to use the port worldwide node name, which as we can see here is 16 hexadecimal characters. It's much simpler, much easier, much more intuitive. Well, if you spent any time reading Cisco documentation, then you know that your network needs to be intuitive, and you had better have granularity. Well, in this case, they're right. This is a pretty helpful feature. Fibre channel aliases give us the ability to use familiar names so that we don't have to configure worldwide port names in our zone sets. They are locally significant, which means they're not going to be present on other switches, unless we distribute these Fibre channel aliases using zone sets. So now that we have an idea of what Fibre channel aliases are and what they're supposed to do, we're going to show you how to configure them on our Fibre channel switches. Here's our topology. We have two Fibre channel switches, MDS1 and MDS2. We have a server connected to MDS2, and there's its port worldwide node name. And we have a JBOD, just a bunch of disks, connected to both MDS1 and MDS2, and there's its port worldwide node name. We're going to use vSAN 201 for this demonstration. Now, if we were going to reference these devices, we would have to use their hexadecimal name. And instead of doing that, we're going to show you how to create Fibre channel aliases so that we can reference those. We're going to begin by configuring our aliases on the MDS2 switch. And here are the commands that we're going to use. From global configuration, we would go into the MDS switch and use the command fc alias name, and then this name is going to be our alias. Here we're going to use server 1, and then we have to reference the vSAN. So in vSAN 201, we're going to create the alias server 1, and the member is going to be the port worldwide node name, and there's our server. Then we're going to create an alias for our JBOD. fc alias name jbod-a-d1, or whatever name you would like to use, vSAN 201. member, and then the port worldwide node name of one of the disks on our JBOD. If we had 8 disks in our JBOD, then we would have 8 port worldwide node names. And that's a lot to keep track of. So as you can see, creating aliases or familiar names for each of those disks is going to be much simpler. We're going to continue with the command show fc alias, and we can see that we've got 2 aliases created on our MDS2 switch. JBOD1, it lists the port worldwide node name, and server1, and it lists its port worldwide node name. Now that's really all there is to it in regards to creating Fibre channel aliases. We're going to use those aliases in our zones and our zone sets. And that's a topic that we're going to cover in the zoning module. When we want to control which object has access to which object, we're going to do that with zones, and we will not have to reference our port worldwide node names if we know how to create Fibre channel aliases. Coming up next, we're going to show you how to configure distributed device aliases. These will be distributed to all of the switches in our fabric, and they will not be limited to a vSAN.